I know math is not the Conservative Party of Canada's forte.
And the budget will balance itself.
So,
can be cancer-free.
Nina, I love you, sis.
Bravo.
The honourable member from Timmins, James Bay.
The homelessness crisis in Northern Ontario has become a social disaster. Municipalities, agencies, healthcare systems are stretched to the breaking point. And yet this Liberal government is telling frontline agencies to get ready for massive cuts. The Reaching Home program is an essential lifeline for northern communities, and yet the government is telling Cochrane District, which includes Timmins, to get ready for a 52% cut in funding. Sault Ste. Marie is facing 60% cuts, while Sudbury and Nipissing will get whacked with a 70% cut. This will devastate our region and leave vulnerable people at serious risk. In Budget 2024, the Liberals bragged about how much money they will invest in housing and the homeless, but nice words won't keep people safe. In Northern Ontario, they're ignoring calls from municipalities for clarity. This isn't good enough. So people in the North are asking their Liberal MPs a simple question. Will they fight to reverse the cuts and ensure that more funding is brought to the table to fight the nightmare of homelessness in Northern Ontario?
The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge the remarkable contribution of one of my predecessors today, the member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles, block member, the Honourable Gilles A. Perron. When I decided to run, Gilles told me, look, if you don't wear out a pair of shoes in the campaign, you don't deserve to be elected. And on the night of your victory, make the most of it, because the next day you're right back on the campaign trail. For over 11 years, Gilles wore out his shoes meeting his constituents. His greatest political contribution was that thanks to him, PTSD has finally been recognized among veterans. We're talking about a historic moment for the people who defended our democracy. As you draw your last breath, I promise to honor your political legacy, Gilles, in the service of the invisible wounded. For Rivière-des-Mille-Îles, I will still wear out my shoes, thinking of you. Gilles, we love you.
The honourable member from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberal government is not worth the drugs, disorder, death, and destruction. In BC, more people are dying as taxpayer-funded deadly drugs flood the streets. Kids' playgrounds are littered with needles and crack pipes, and it is impossible for law enforcement to do their job and keep communities safe. A year after the Prime Minister made crack, heroin, fentanyl, meth, and other drugs legal in BC, a record 2,500 British Columbians lost their lives to addiction. Last year, the former Minister of Addictions assured us they would end this deadly experiment if public health and safety indicators were not met. Both are failing. And BC's NDP Premier is now pleading with the Prime Minister to rescue them from this failed policy. Yet the Minister of Addiction refuses immediate action. Now the Prime Minister wants to expand his failed policy of deadly drugs to Canada's largest city, Toronto, despite opposition from the Premier.
How many scandals do you think Trudeau has had? I have another video over here showing how many, and it is a lot. And I think shame needs to be brought back into Canada because he has no shame anymore. And I think it just trickles down to everyone underneath him. And that's what's really frustrating about Trudeau. And as far as an election is concerned, obviously there should have been one a year ago. But do you think it'll really be in October 2025? Because his steam, like all he has to do is smile and for the camera, go on his vacations. There's going to be a new love in his life coming up, probably, because he has to, because he needs to take attention away from himself. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. Let's go back to the video.
More Canadians must die before the NDP Liberals will finally put an end to this failed drug legalization policy.
The honourable member from Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2024 promises to deliver a vision for Canada that is fairer and more affordable for every generation. In my riding of Mississauga, Erin Mills, residents, especially younger generations.
I know math is not the Conservative Party of Canada's forte.
And the budget will balance itself.
So,
deserve a fair chance at purchasing their own home. That's That's why Budget 2024 proposes an ambitious plan to invest into more affordable housing initiatives to unlock 3.87 million more homes by 2031 for Canadians. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2024 is also investing $1 billion into the National School Food Program to the benefit of over 400,000 Canadian children, so that no child in this country goes to school hungry. As we know, a full belly leads to sharper minds. There are so many aspects of Budget 2024 that work towards strengthening our middle class, and I encourage all members in this House to support this budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions orales, oral questions.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the crime or the drugs. This government's radical, extreme drug policies, which are supported by the Bloc Québécois, have tripled overdose deaths. In the Journal de Montréal today, we can read there are used needles on the floor, there are terrible scenes to be witnessed, there are supervised consumption sites, some of which are a couple steps away from schools in Montreal. When will the Prime Minister reverse his radical policies which are causing deaths? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the opioid crisis is terrible. It's occurring across the country. But what we need to fix this is not more conservative ideology. We need solutions based on compassion, healthcare, and science. We need evidence-based solutions. Now we will continue to work together with provinces and with communities to address this public health crisis. We will do so in a thorough...
I know math is not the Conservative Party of Canada's forte.
And the budget will balance itself.
So,
and compassionate manner. That is what Canadians expect. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Minister is not worth the drugs and death. His extreme and radical drug policy has increased overdose deaths in British Columbia by 380%. In the year following his decriminalization of crack, heroin, and other hard drugs in hospitals, transit buses, coffee shops, and parks where children play, there has been a record-smashing 2,500 deaths. Will the Prime Minister accept the BC NDP's demand to recriminalize those drugs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I just answered that question. What hasn't been answered by the Leader of the Opposition is why he chooses to continue to court extreme right nationalist groups like Diagolon. He refuses to denounce these extremists who don't believe Canadians should coexist with each other. Instead, they call for war and tell people to follow their instincts accordingly. The Leader of the Conservative Party is actively courting the support of groups with white nationalist views. It is disturbing, and he needs to stand up and apologize now.
Right now.
Colleagues, so soon in question period, it is important that we try to control ourselves. I'll ask the honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton, please, to allow members to ask the questions and members to respond. The Honourable Leader.
And is Chrystia Freeland doing a good job? She is the Finance Minister and the Vice President of Canada. And she is the one that just looks like her head is just spinning when she talks. It's always like trying to drag it on, never answer a question. And maybe they should have this I thought they would always do this. When they ask a question, say, do you mind after you finish it, if you give me 5 seconds to say if you answered it or not for our listeners? Because it is so frustrating. Everything is an infomercial with both of them. And that's something that I think needs to be stopped. Maybe the whole Constitution and the human rights and everything needs to be rewritten again after those two are gone, because this is just frustrating what they're doing. Anyway, let's go back to the video.